Hey guys, it's QAShahin here, and I'm really excited about this particular series. Today we're going to start looking at using Jenkins. So this whole series is going to be about using Jenkins to predominantly run various different types of tests all in your local environment. So there will be a number of videos in this series, and today we're going to jump straight in and we're going to talk about how to ultimately install Jenkins in your local environment and run a very simple test against it just to make sure that our setup is correct. So what is the agenda of this particular video? So first of all, I'm going to quickly introduce you to Jenkins. We are then going to go through the installation process, and then we're going to run a very basic test to prove that our Jenkins has installed correctly. So first of all, what is Jenkins? Jenkins is basically a CI environment. CI standing for continuous integration. It's an environment which is supposed to allow you to constantly build your code or build by running tests against your code. In essence, it's an environment that allows you to quickly build versions of your code and run various tests against it. And looking at our second question, why would you want to use Jenkins? There are a number of reasons. The biggest reason is to quickly test to see that your code still works. So let me just explain really quickly what this means. If we say have an application which has a number of tests running against it, by quickly going to Jenkins and building, in other words, running all your existing tests against a certain code base or just running a test, you prove whether your code works or not. You'll get a much better understanding of this once we actually start to use Jenkins. So what are we going to do? So right away, the first thing we're going to do is go through the installation process. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we have Java installed, and we're going to use Eclipse as the IDE. Why are we using Eclipse? Well, because Eclipse is super famous, everyone knows it, everyone uses it. It's probably the first IDE everyone works with, and it's open source and it's free. We will then start to look at how to set up Maven. So why do we need to set up Maven? We need Maven because when we eventually have Jenkins up and running, we will use Maven commands to build and run our tests using Maven. And finally, we will start and look at how to set up Jenkins in our environment. So let's just start with that. So the first thing we're going to do is Java, and then Maven, and then Jenkins. Right, so let's have a look at installing Java. So to download Java, just go to Java's homepage. So this is the link we want. I have downloaded Java 8. So what we want to do is download the JDK. So just go ahead and download that. So to download it, you need to accept the license and download whichever one applies to your machine. So I'm going to download this particular one because I have a Windows 32-bit machine. So while that's downloaded, let's go ahead and start to download Maven. So this is the link you want. And if you scroll down, what we want is basically the zip file. So this should be fine. So let's go ahead and download this as well. And finally, we also need to download Jenkins. So again, just say download Jenkins. And go to Jenkins. And just hit download Jenkins, and we'll download the WAR file. We will download the LTS version because that seems to have a sensible amount of support. Great. So that's it. That's all you need. You just need these 3 files, and we now need to start looking at setting up each one of them individually. Also, just go download Eclipse, and I usually go straight to this link, Eclipse IDE for Java EE, and then just go ahead and download whichever one you want. Now, something important to note, when you run Eclipse after downloading it, it usually won't work because it expects to have Java installed on your machine. So in order to run Eclipse, strictly what you need to do is download Java, install it, download Eclipse, run it, download Maven, check that it works, and then just download Jenkins. Okay, so all of our downloads have now completed. We're going to go ahead and we are going to run the installations. So the first thing you want to do is run the JDK. So if we just double click on this and then just run through this as you normally would. So once you double click on this, it may take a while, but eventually this window will pop up. Just literally go through all the buttons. So there is no need to kind of fiddle around with any of this. Next. And let this install. So eventually you'll get this folder up. Now on my particular machine, for some bizarre reason, the buttons are on the top. You may see this, you may not. I don't know, there's something wrong with the installation itself. So I can just about see a next button here. So just click on that. So while still Java is installing, like I said, it can take a while, it shouldn't take too long. Let's just go ahead and start to set up our Maven. So for Maven, all we need to do is just extract it. So let's just extract it to this local directory. Okay, so it looks like it extracted Maven. So if I go back to downloads, what's happened is extracted a folder in the downloads directory. If I go in one level, then there's Maven and the version. And if I go in one more level, then I can see that it has all the relevant folders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up and I'm going to go in one root and I'm going to rename this to Maven, and then I'm going to cut and paste this into my C directory. So the first thing that I have pasted in is this Maven directory. Now I did say that we'll need Eclipse. So to make it a little bit easier for you, I'm actually going to download Eclipse and install that as well, just so everyone else can follow. So like I said, I'm downloading the 32-bit version because that is what my operating system supports. And I'm just going to save it. So I'm going to let that download in the background, and I'm going to quickly check on the status of my Java. And it looks like it's successfully installed, so that's great. So I'm just going to close that. Okay, so Eclipse has now finished downloading. If I go to downloads, then I can see there's Eclipse. So the first thing I'm going to do is just delete this Maven stuff because I've dealt with it. And I'm going to get rid of the JDK installer as well because I've done that also. And I'm now going to extract Eclipse, and I'm going to extract it in the current directory. Okay, so it's extracted. Now all we're going to do is copy the Eclipse folder into our C directory. And finally, so we can get rid of Eclipse now. The final thing is the Jenkins war. So all I'm going to do is create a Jenkins folder, and I'm going to copy paste the war folder into the Jenkins folder, and then move Jenkins from the download directory into my C directory. So just to quickly recap, we downloaded Maven, we downloaded Eclipse, and we downloaded Jenkins, and we moved all three into our C directory. Now, before we do anything else, we still need to add in a couple of paths into our environment variables. So let's quickly do that. So if I go to computer and if I right click and then properties and then click on advanced system settings and then environment variables, what I need to do is introduce three different variables. So the first variable I need to introduce, so all you have to do this is go to your system variables and click new. The first one I need to do is called Java_home, and in here I am going to paste in the directory where I installed Java. So that is in program files and then Java and then JDK, and then all I'm going to do is copy paste this directory into variable value and hit OK. I also need to add in directories for Maven. So for Maven is m2_home, and for this it is the location where I stored Maven, which is in C drive also. So if I click on Maven and then just copy paste this directory into here, And I also did one more, which is Maven underscore home with the exact same directory. Right, so we've introduced three system variables: Java underscore home, which has the directory pointing to where we install JDK. We have one that is m2 underscore home for Maven, and we have another which is Maven underscore home, again for Maven. What we need to do now is add these three into our path system variable. So if you search for your system variables, you will find one that says path, which is this one here. So for this one, hit the edit button, and we need to now effectively add in those three into here. And to do this, we do semicolon, we do %. So we add in the first one, which is Java underscore home, %, and then \bin. And what we need to do is repeat the exact same thing for m2 underscore home and Maven underscore home. So what does this actually mean? What this means is this is taking the value from the system variable that we added. So this is basically effectively substituting our directory where we installed Java. The reason we do this is so that we can easily change the system variable, and this would be automatically repeated in path. We also need to do this so that when we start typing stuff into the command line, it will recognize where our Java, where our Maven is installed. So let's carry on and do the other two as well. So that's m2 underscore home, %\bin, semicolon, Maven underscore home, %\bin, semicolon, and hit OK, OK, and OK. So assuming you've set those three paths and you've appended them to your path, if you now open up command, if you type in Java space dash version, you should get a version of Java. So this confirms that your version of Java has installed. If you do the same thing for Maven, which is mvn space dash and then version, if you get a version for Maven, then that means Maven has installed. So you have now successfully installed both Java and Maven. Now the final thing to check is to see if we are able to run Jenkins. So to run Jenkins is actually very, very simple. Remember that WAR file we downloaded in our C drive? A WAR file is effectively a jar file. So all we're going to do is just run this locally. So we're going to say Java space dash jar and then provide the location to the WAR file. So if we literally drag this in and hit enter, this is now basically running an instance of Jenkins locally on your machine. So to actually see Jenkins, all you do is you go to localhost :8080, and that should now direct you to Jenkins. To log into Jenkins, now if you're doing this for the first time, what will happen is you will get a very simple screen saying set up Jenkins. Just follow the instructions, and in this command prompt window you will get a password, a temporary password given to you. Just paste that password into password and then you'll be able to log in. Great, so we are now in Jenkins. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and write a very simple test in Eclipse. So to start Eclipse, we're going to go back to our C drive, go into Eclipse and just start Eclipse. Now, because we've checked to see that a version is returned for Java, Eclipse should now run without any issues. Okay, so when you get the option to select a workspace, just select the default workspace. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. Say new project. So let's search for Maven and select Maven project. Let's just say create a simple project for now, and the group ID we're going to give is going to be QAShahin, and the artifact ID we're going to do is JUnit demo, and just hit finish. And that should now create a very simple project for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a test in source test Java. So right click here, say new, and let's just say class, and let's call this sample test, hit finish. And all we're going to do is write an absolute basic test. So public void simple test, and all we're going to say is int a is equal to 1, int b is equal to 2, and we're going to say assert true that a plus b is equal to 3. So let's go ahead and import in these classes. So it's saying that I don't have JUnit, which is true because this is a Maven project and I haven't actually added it into my POM. So let's go ahead and do that. So open your POM, go to the POM XML, and let's quickly go and fetch the dependency for JUnit. So to do that, all we'll do is JUnit Maven dependency, and let's just get the latest one. So all we need to do is copy paste this in. So we're going to say dependencies and paste that in. So save it. And when we save it, it should start to pull in the jars. So let's go back to our test, and now if you try and hover over it, you should get import test. And same for the assert true. And there you go. So that's it. So now what we're going to do is try and run this test from the command line. But before we do that, let's just right click here and run it from here just to make sure it's working. So this is definitely working via the IDE, but what we want to do now is actually run this via command line. And we're going to use Maven to run the test via command line. So what I'm going to do is open up a new command prompt window, and I'm going to navigate to this directory. So if I say dir, so I know my project's in workspace, so I'm going to go into workspace, and I know that my project is in JUnit-demo, so I'm going to go in there. And if I do a dir in here as well, so dir stands for directory. It's a shortcut to printing directories. Whenever you want to run a Maven command, you always need to run it from a directory that contains the POM file. So if I now say mvn test in the same directory that the POM file is in, it should run this test. So as you can see, it ran the test, and it only found one test, and it was able to see that there wasn't any issues, which is great. This is exactly what we're expecting. So if we go back to our test now and just copy paste this, and this time let's cause it to fail. So we're going to rename the test from pass, and this one I'm going to rename it to fail. And this time, let's say this is going to be equal to 4. Now obviously 1 plus 2 isn't 4, it's 3. But this is just to force a fail. So now if we run this, we can see that one of the tests passed, i.e. the test we expect to pass, and the other one failed, which is expected. If we do the exact same thing from the command line now, so mvn test, we can see that the exact same thing happened. We have two tests, one failed, and the one that failed was simple test failed. Great. So now what we want to do is, with all of this setup finally done, we want to basically replicate this but in Jenkins. And it is surprisingly easy to replicate this in Jenkins. So let's go to Jenkins, and we will go to our Jenkins dashboard. And what we will do is basically create a new job. A job is something, it is a process that actually does something. So in our instance, our new job will actually be responsible for running this test. So to do that, let's say create new jobs, and let's give this a name. So I'm going to call it JUnit demo, and let's give it a freestyle project for now, and let's just say okay. So in here, all we're going to do is go down and we're going to add in a build step, and we're going to invoke a Maven command. So in here, all we want to do is exactly the same thing we did here. So in here we said mvn test, if you remember. So if I just scroll up a bit, as you can see here. So in here, test is basically a goal. Now we don't need to do this mvn test because mvn is invoking Maven, but this is invoking Maven automatically. So all we need to do is basically say test. If we now hit the advanced button, we can tell it where our POM file is. So our POM file is located in, if we go back, it's in users, and then my username, and then workspace, and then JUnit, and then there's our POM file there. So all I need to do is supply this directory path into the POM, and then save it. And that's it. So now if we go back to Jenkins, we can see that we have this particular new job. So if I run this, to run this, all I have to do is go and hit this particular button here. So all of this stuff I will explain in the next video. So hit the button and we can see it's now running. Okay, so if I just refresh this page, or rather if I enable auto refresh, we can see that there is a red button. In other words, it's failed. So let's have a look at the failure. So if I go into JUnit demo, then I can see one build has failed. So if I look at it, and if I click on console output, it will give me a log. And if I go down to the very end, I can see that it had 2 tests and one other test failed. So this is effectively proving that we are now definitely able to run a Jenkins job. In particular, we ran a Maven job via Jenkins. So just to prove that it is still all connected, what we'll do is we'll change this to, or rather we'll change 1 to now a 2, and we'll just save this. And now we'll go straight to Jenkins and we will rerun this test. And now notice this has changed from red to blue. If we go into the actual job, we can see that this one, which we know failed, but this one says it's a success. So if we click on the actual job and we click on the output and we go down to the very bottom, we can see there were 2 tests and they all passed. So this is now evidence that our setup is working and we were successfully able to create a really simple project and then run it in Jenkins. So when we did to run a basic test, what we did was we created a basic project in Eclipse. We wrote a simple JUnit test. We confirmed that it ran via the command line, and then we created a new job in Jenkins and we ran it. And that's really it. It's nothing more complicated than that. Jenkins is actually a super easy, a super quick tool to use if you want to run jobs via Jenkins. In the next couple of videos, we'll look at some more interesting examples, such as using Selenium at some point, using Cucumber at some point, using Protector at some point, various different examples. We'll also spend some time trying to understand the different types of configurations someone can do via Jenkins to make your life a little bit more easy. Anyway, thank you very much for watching my video. I'll see you in the next one.